Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting, but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Susan Durant, Chair of Planning Committee. Before we commence, I'd like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We are not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber on my right. When you have left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs, where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is in the public square in front of CAS beyond the fountain. I'd like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded. And by entering the council chamber, you accept that you will be recorded and your images retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press the large red button underneath the microphone and ensure the red light is illuminated. This will ensure that you are recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and aware of what they will be considering today. If any member of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of an application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. Item 1 on today's agenda is apologies for absence, and we've received apology for Councillor Andy Pickering. Are there any other apologies, please? No? Thank you for that. Item 2 is exclusion of the public and press. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No, thank you for that.
Yes.
Oh, Councillor Beach, have you filled a form in?
No, just to say, I had a letter, and I think I may be the only one on this first application, asking that that I should ask for a site visit. I have not replied to it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Beach. Item 4 is the minutes of the Extraordinary Planning Committee meeting held on the 31st of March. Can the minutes be moved as a true and accurate record? Can we have a seconder, please? And is that agreed? Thank you. Item 5 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of April 2023. Can that be moved as a true record? Is that seconded? And is it agreed? Thank you. Item 5 is the schedule of applications. The first application is application 22/00936/FUL, which is the engineering operation for creation of access track and biofertiliser storage lagoon at Red House Farm, Doncaster, and it is Mark Ramsey, the planning officer, that will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This proposal seeks planning permission for engineering operations to create a lagoon to store biofertiliser within the holding of Red House Farm to allow timely spraying of crops without having to wait deliveries. Comprises of the excavation of soil and then be used to create banking to form a lagoon that would enable approximately 6,000 cubic metres of biofertiliser to be temporarily stored before use on the farm. The lagoon will be lined and covered with high-strength poly, olefin, and the seams will be welded to include vents. Proposal also includes a spur from the already authorised access track that leads from Sheep Lane to the farmyard. So will replace the existing tank used for storing biofertiliser, which is located further to the west and is currently accessed from Hangmanstone Lane. It requires delivery vehicles to exit the farm within the village. The application was first heard at Planning Committee on the 4th of April and deferred for the following reasons: to provide clarity on extent of the farm holding, identify on what parcels of land a digester would be used, provide clarity in respect of planning history, and provide clarity in respect of the difference in odour between the existing tank and the proposed development. The applicant has clarified that the farm holding would be serviced by the lagoon as is shown in the blue line on the plan, with land to the north of the village and other fields to the east of Sheep Lane. The owners of the farm own other land, but this will be serviced separately, and a condition limiting the use to this area is recommended. The applicants provided a statement from their consultants that explained the requirement for a much larger capacity lagoon rather than the existing tank. During February and March, nearly all the land is planted and requires between 30 and 50 cubic metres of fertiliser per hectare over that period. Once filled to capacity, the lagoon would provide sufficient capacity to allow the crops to be fertilised at the most optimum time, while still being topped up as regular deliveries would continue. In order for the lagoon to be used to serve any more land, it would have to be even bigger and also involve double handling, which the applicants state is logistically impractical, and they have further stated they do not intend to transfer the contents elsewhere. We can look at some of the history to Red House farm planning applications, which I've listed in the report. In 2017, an application for a lagoon the northwest corner of the holding was refused to planning committee. The reasons given were due to the conflict with users of the public bridleway, and also the accesses to the farm from Doncaster Road and Hangmanstone Road were considered dangerous. Further application for the same development, but instead came in as a lawful development certificate, was also refused. The 2018 application sought to show that the same development was in fact permitted development under Part 6 of the General Permitted Development Order, and therefore would not require planning permission. In determining that certificate, a planning judgment or balancing exercise on the merits wasn't made. It was determined on the basis of whether the proposed development would comply with the relevant legislation. It's considered by office following legal advice from Council that the applicant had failed to provide that sufficient information to demonstrate that it fell within the relevant parts of the order. So without that information, the application for the certificate was refused. In 2018, a bladder tank and referred by the applicants as a mesh silo, bladder tank referred to by the applicants, and a mesh silo as referred to by the planning inspector was erected adjacent to Hangmanstone Lane without planning permission. The applicants asserted that planning permission was not required. An enforcement notice was then served by the authority. The appeal was heard by an inspector at a public inquiry in 2021, and a decision issued that August. While the inspector agreed the development did need planning permission, the enforcement notice was quashed and planning permission granted. Other development has largely concentrated on the yard area, with alterations or replacement to buildings, addition of solar panels, and connection of a ground source heat pump from an adjacent field to help power the grain dryer. A new barn was approved, but after the scheme was altered to include a new access directly from Sheep Lane. This is under construction as part of this development, sharing part of that access. Moving on to odour, the 2021 public inquiry heard that there were objections to the odour given off by the digestate from the mesh silo. Upon the site visit, the inspector noted the odour of digestate was apparent when standing downwind of the silo and recognised it was unpleasant, although confined to an area close to it. He noted that it may be stronger and travel further at other times, for example, when digestate is delivered and being transferred into and from the tanker, or when the wind was stronger. The inspector noted the details of complaints about odour had not been provided, although representations provided in response to the publicity surrounding the inquiry itself had all been sent to the inspector. Upon checking with environmental health, the complaints received in terms of statutory nuisance had nearly all been in regard to spreading on the land and not the actual operation of the tank. There were a small number of instances of spills occurring from deliveries, and the inspector noted in his report sight of some material on the ground by the tank when he did his visit. The inspector noted that the closest residential properties were some distance away, and the application of digestate to land is a legitimate farming operation. Smell associated with fertilisers is associated with farming in that respect not unexpected. The inspector did not consider chemical composition of digestate to be a material consideration. So staying on that topic, no technical assessment had been made about odour as part of that appeal, so there's not a baseline for comparison with what is proposed by the creation of the lagoon. The odour management plan is specific to this proposal. Lagoon has permanent cover welded closed rather than relying on a crustiform, which has proved less reliable in examples in other parts of the borough. The plan includes, The plan includes detailed windrows modelling and concludes that any impacts, if there were, would be at close quarters and only likely to occur when being filled. The odour from spreading would similarly be similar to that as present, as it been used on the farm for several years and is subject to compliance with codes of good practice produced by DEFRA and subject to enforcement if it causes a statutory nuisance through environmental protection legislation. Since the application was presented, there have been additional representations. In terms of challenging the figures produced by Earthcare, they have based the need on farming the land to the north and east of the farm and assessed that to provide enough capacity where there's greatest need, 6,000 cubic metres is the ideal amount, especially with weather being so changeable. This allows the most opportunity time to be able to spread the biofertiliser on the land without risking running out or waiting for a delivery. Chemical composition is limited through its certification under PAS 110. Further, there are regulations which further restrict what can go into the food chain, so at-risk materials are banned by the animal bioproducts regulations and also reinforced through protocols for biodigestate set by the Environment Agency. There was reference to a development that's challenged in the courts for a chicken shed and spreading waste from that on adjacent land, but this differs in that that was a far more intensive development that triggered requirements under the EIA regime and also introduced spreading waste from the shed, whereas this application seeks to move and enlarge the storage of the biofertiliser already used on the farm. The applicants accept that the existing mess storage would become redundant and a condition requiring its removal is included in the recommendation. The access for deliveries also no longer need to share the public bridleway or use the access from Hangmanstone Road or turning out of the farmyard onto Doncaster Road within the village. Conditions proposed that would require that to be the case, so effectively deliveries would be solely from Sheep Lane. So if we just refer to the plans and photos for this proposal to refresh your memories from when it was previously at this meeting. The site lies north of the village and south of Melton Wood, with the access running from Sheep Lane. Dogleg at the end is just to ensure there's sufficient visibility display for vehicles turning in and out of the farm onto Sheep Lane. It's a slightly more detailed drawing showing the banking around the lagoon. And here's an overhead plan showing the vents that would be in the cover. And then there's a typical cross-section showing how the lagoon would be filled. So this aerial view shows the current arrangements for deliveries. I'll just highlight in yellow there. Accessing the mesh tank, and they come off Hangmanstone Road just off the north of the map and leave at the existing entrance to the farm in the village, so at the bottom of that yellow line. The next photo is from the new access off Sheep Lane. So that's what's been under construction to link Sheep Lane to the farmyard, and then roughly about halfway to the horizon, there'll be a spur come off that heading north to link to the lagoon if you approve the proposal. So the next one is from the same vantage point, but looking northwest towards Melton Wood, and the pink arrow roughly shows where the lagoon would be. And then next photo is from the opposite end of the village, so at the top end of where the houses are on Hagmanstone Lane, looking back east. So you've got the pink arrow shows roughly where the lagoon would be. The yellow line shows where the access road would link to the farmyard, and the blue arrow just shows the edge of the farmyard where the existing farm buildings are. And then I think this is the last of my photos. So looking south from the footpath that runs through Melton Wood, and then looking south. So again, have roughly where the lagoon would be. The access tracks, the yellow line, and then the blue arrow shows the existing farm buildings just on the horizon. So in conclusion, the proposal is considered in the context of the presumption in favour of sustainable development. Officers have identified economic factors that weigh in positive favour, along with the social and environmental benefits from deliveries no longer having to come through High Melton Village and the Hagmanstone Lane bridleway, but balanced against a moderate impact on the landscape and limited impact on, amenities of local residents from vehicle movements and odour when in close proximity to the lagoon. Balance of planning considerations, the harm from its appearance can first be mitigated partly by landscaping around the lagoon, which will also contribute to biodiversity. Harm is outweighed by the economic benefit of allowing the lagoon to contribute to a local rural enterprise, and for those reasons it's recommended for approval subject to the conditions listed at the end of the report.
Thank you for that, Mark. First of all, we've got Parish Councillor Martin Pitt, the High Melton Parish Council, has requested to speak in opposition of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak, and again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Before I start, can you confirm that you can hear me? Because I was unconvinced the last time I was speaking that it was getting through. Is it satisfactory?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
And we'll just wait 1 moment. Mark wants to make a comment. It's just bring your presentation on for you.
Thank you. That's a horrible sight.
If you'd like to commence.
It's okay, thank you. Hello, I'm Martin Pick, Chair of High Melton Parish Council. Many thanks for this opportunity to address you all today. I'm speaking on behalf of the Parish Council and also on behalf of many members of our community. We ask you to reject this application for the following reasons. If I could have the next slide, please. As I understand it, in accepting the proposed lagoon, you would also accept responsibility under planning law for its impact, spreading of biodigestate. The lagoon would allow increased spreading of digestate up to the boundary of people's homes in High Melton. The smell created is unacceptable, with over 160 people already having submitted written complaints to Environmental Health. In addition, DCC Environmental Health, the applicant, a ward councillor, and an appeal officer also considered the odour offensive. The odour is chemical rather than agricultural in nature. It is dreadful and it reduces our amenity. It invades our homes and makes outdoor space unusable. If this proposal is accepted, I believe that the people in High Melton would receive less protection than they currently have. The mesh tank appeal ruling imposed spreading restrictions via an odour management plan, and I do not believe these restrictions have been fully carried forward to this application. Next slide, please. Much has been made of improving transport through the village in the application, but this is not dependent on this planning application. The applicant has already constructed a new tarmacked farm entry, which you can see pictures of, onto Sheep Lane. It is already there, it's ready for use, but it is not being used. The old entrance continues to be used. Next slide, please, Mark. There are concerns over health impacts. Individuals in High Melton, myself as a scientist with experience working in the chemical industries, and a local GP are expressing concerns. Put simply, we want to know what is in this reactive biological mixture of chemicals called biodigestate. Before you sign off on this application, please ask for direct answers to the following reasonable questions. What is it? What are the health implications? And finally, is it safe? Next slide, please, Mark. Much is made in the application of the need for a 6,000 metre cubed lagoon to supply the farm. However, at the appeal hearing, it was established that a 1,200 metre cube tank is adequate. The smaller requirement is also confirmed by calculations using information contained within this current application. It is also confirmed by the ongoing successful operation of the farm. Why then should you approve a further incursion into our precious green belt in an area of increasing recreational importance when the evidence provided by the applicant confirms that the lagoon is not needed? Final slide, please, Mark. In summary, I'm asking you to reject this application for the following reasons. Number one, severe reduction in amenity for residents of High Melton, Melton Woods and the local bridleways and footpaths. Number two, protections introduced following the successful appeal hearing appear to be being removed by this application. Number three, legitimate concerns over health impacts have not been addressed to the reasonable satisfaction of many High Melton residents.
1 minute remaining.
And finally, this is an unnecessary incursion into the greenbelt for an ugly, permanent lagoon which is akin in appearance to a Cold War bunker, and which the applicant's own figures confirm is not required for the successful operation of the farm. My final question to you is, what is the very special circumstance which would allow you to accept this incursion into our greenbelt? Thank you for your time, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you for that. Do any of the committee member, Councillor Anderson?
Just to get a better understanding of the odour and the smell, how often throughout the year does it smell? Is it 1 month every day, or?
It's not that frequent. It's tied to the crop cycle, which you can see in the application. Unfortunately for the residents of High Melton, it tends to have been on days when it has been warmest. For example, on the hottest 2 days we had last year, those were days on which the biodigestate was spread. We were advised to open our windows to ventilate our homes, but people had to close them to keep the smell out. So it's tied to the crop cycles. The farm also produces haylage, which I understand is a highly profitable crop. And on haylage, there are far more applications per year than there are on arable crops. I hope that's, yeah.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions for Councillor Pick? Thank you for your time. We now have Mr. Ian Stewart, who is a member of the public that has requested to speak in opposition of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. If you please press the large red button when you're ready to start, and again when you end your submission, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining. That's correct.
Right, thank you. Hello, I'm Ian Stewart. I'm a pretty experienced planning officer, as you can probably tell from the grey hairs, but I'm here today to represent a great many very worried local people. The officer report now confirms that this committee refused a similar application only some 4 years ago, mainly on grounds of odour. You might ask what's changed since then. Well, one significant change is that the applicant erected a tank without planning permission. Enforcement action followed, but as the report confirms, the appeal inspector was not provided by the council with evidence relating to the noxious odour, and without it, he had no justifiable reason to refuse permission. Dr. Pick has told you that since that tank was built, the spreading of the biodigester at Red House Farm has continued to seriously detract from the everyday life of local residents. And now the proposed tank is to be 5 times bigger. You might ask why, because the story seems to change regularly. It starts with the applicant's evidence to the appeal inquiry that the tank was selected, and I quote, to serve the farm unit as a whole. That seems clear enough. It was designed with the capacity just for Red House Farm and Red House Farm only. Then in justifying this application for a tank 5 times bigger, the applicant's agent first wrote that the capacity was calculated to serve some 1,600 acres, which is far bigger than the 460 acres of Red House Farm. The intention to serve other farms as well was also confirmed at this committee meeting last time by the applicant's agent. In other words, it was calculated to serve an area some 3.5 times bigger than Red House Farm. Indeed, it seems entirely logical that a bigger tank would be needed to serve a bigger area. You're now informed that this bigger tank is necessary only to serve the smaller area of Red House Farm, and you might wonder why the previous calculations provided to the appeal must have been so wrong. We seem to be going in circles. Which version do we believe? If we think that despite the latest assurances, the storage tank is eventually intended to serve far more farms, then traffic and odour problems would be widespread. On the other hand, if a tank 5 times bigger is really necessary just for Red House Farm, then presumably 5 times more product will be spread, and the dreadful smell already suffered by residents might arguably last 5 times longer. To be clear, the smell comes mainly from the act of spreading the digestate on the land, not just from the storage tank. And contrary to comment in your report, a recent Court of Appeal judgment is highly relevant. In that case, planning permission had been granted for poultry sheds. As here, local residents objected on grounds that odour caused by the spreading of the chicken manure on surrounding farmland would harm their amenity, and they obtained a judicial review. One of the key issues is whether an assessment should have been carried out of the effects of spreading the manure, as it was only a secondary activity which was not in itself the subject of the planning application. And the court ruled that in addition to the effect of odour from the poultry sheds, the secondary effects of spreading it on the land should also have been assessed. That case emphasises 2 key points. Firstly, that as a planning committee, you do have every right to consider the effect of spreading digestate on the land, which of course would extend the cordon sanitaire over the whole village. And secondly, with reference to paragraph 9.7 of your report, that because in this case an assessment was required for the impact of storing the digestate, then the secondary effects of spreading it should also have been assessed. It's a serious omission which offers the risk of judicial review. Finally, I take issue with the suggestion that none of this matters because any subsequent nuisance could be dealt with by the Environmental Health Department. I call that passing the buck. The planning system is intended to identify and prevent potential problems at source, not to rely on others to clear up the mess afterwards. So, 2 key points. Firstly, is the tank this big really necessary, or is there some other reason for it? And secondly, the fact that an assessment of the likely effects of odour was carried out, whether it should have been or not, it was carried out, and relied on, therefore, in the decision-making process, means that in law it should have been fit for purpose, adequate for the job. That's the legal point that your legal officer might wish to comment. This proposal, ladies and gentlemen, is of huge concern to a very great many people locally. There were some 160 objectors to it. I thank you for listening so carefully and respectfully ask you to refuse the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Mr Stewart. Does any of the committee have any questions? Thank you for your time. Committee members will now go into debate. Can I advise members that we have Doncaster Council officers in attendance at the meeting from Highways, Drainage, Transportation, Environmental Health and Urban Design to answer any technical questions you may have on applications. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the planning case officer a question? Councillor Cox.
Who's from Environmental Health? No? Oh, hello. What are your thoughts about the tank size and it being used? Are you fine with it?
I've assessed the data that was provided for the that would form the basis of the odour management plan. I've checked all the resources that came from there, where they got the data from, and I believe the statistics that they've provided. I've checked that the odour management plan that they've provided is written in accordance with the Environment Agency's document H4 and with the Institute of Air Quality Management. Broadly speaking, it's on the lines of both of those. The complaints that have been mentioned that we've received are in relation to spreading. They're received approximately between 12 and 18 times a year. The complaints where we've gone out and actually investigated the nuisance from the odour, we've noted that it's a strong smell within the first 24 hours, which is usually gone within 48. So I haven't determined statutory nuisance on any of the complaints that I've been to myself, and none of the other officers that have attended have done so either. So in my opinion, there isn't any grounds for refusing.
I've got a question. Do you know what the biogestate is made up from?
Are you talking about its actual chemical analysis? No, I don't. I know that it's made from food waste, and that the food waste is always part of an assessment chain right from farm to fork. So it's food that's coming from, say, a supermarket that's already been through the whole process. And when the planning officer was referring to specified risk material, I believe there's been a concern about prions being present in the material. So that should have been eliminated. The possibility of prions getting into that material in the first place should have been eliminated by the whole process under the animal byproduct regulations. No specified risk material should be getting into the food waste at all that's going into the system. So that would be brain tissue, spine tissue, things like that. That should all have been kept out completely all the way down the line. So then it's put into tanks. It's heat treated, and it's also broken down by anaerobic action of bacteria to produce methane, to produce energy. The resulting liquor, which will change because it depends on the feedstock, is then tested. And it's tested for heavy metals, plastics, and various different biological, gosh, the word's gone right out of my head. Bacteria that we might pick up, for example, Campylobacter, E. coli, things like that, that might actually get back through food to whatever's eating it or whatever's the crop has been taken off the land. All that is checked before it's all passed out, and that's the PAS 110 protocol. So in the answers that I've had from the Animal Food Health Agency and from Animal APHA. Sorry, all these acronyms, they really do get to me, I can't remember. But that's basically the veterinary service, and they act on behalf of DEFRA to actually check the whole process from start to finish. And they have a series of protocols and series of legislation that comes in all the way through the food chain, right to the point where it gets to being the past 110 standard material that's placed on the ground. As far as I can tell, that it is safe all the way through that chain to production from start to finish.
Thank you very much for that.
But sorry, I can't actually tell you what's in it.
Thank you. Councillor Hogarth, I believe you had yours up, and then Councillor Stapleton.
Yeah, it's just that, like re-food, demould, it possibly demould as used to be there. And they've spent a lot of money on their site trying to get rid of the smell, but occasionally it still happens. But that's on their plant. So that material that's going from their plant or site to this to this planning application, there's still a likely chance that that could be as odour could be as offensive than demoulders used to be.
It definitely has a smell. It definitely has a distinctive smell, and it is, some people find it offensive. It is quite strong, as I say, within the first 24 hours. I would say it's no stronger than, for example, pig manure. It's just different. It's no different from, it's definitely less offensive to my smell, my personal sense of smell, than sewage sludge, which is absolutely, it smells like rotten fish. There's a lot of offensive fertiliser smells that are applied to land. Different people find them offensive in different ways. All I can say is that when we're assessing it under statutory nuisance regime, we're looking at how often, how long, and what the impact is. And as I say to you, it's been there within 24 hours to 48 hours and gone. And that's spreading. Next to the tank, I've been to the tank. I've been stood at the side of the tank that's there in existence whilst a tractor was coupled up and pulling material from the tank. And I did not find it particularly offensive. I could smell something, but I couldn't find it offensive. And I was walking along the bridle path along the fields that they were actually spreading on at the same time.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask this to Mark. I think he may want to pass this over. And look, under economic sustainability, I'm just looking for clarity on this, because we read in the report that the digestate is not a waste product. It is a product, not waste. I'm just a bit unsure then as to why 9.53 we're talking about the licensing requirements to prevent the transfer of this to or resale or selling it on would come under waste transfer regime, because it surely wouldn't, in my understanding of waste transfer licensing. It's not a waste product, so it wouldn't be covered by that. So I'm just looking for clarity.
Yeah. I think it's, at the time, well, obviously there's a lot of concern that this lagoon is more than it, well, what's being applied for, and would then be transferred on elsewhere. The applicants have, stated quite categorically that the size of the lagoon is what they need to service these two elements of land, and they've no intention of taking it on elsewhere. It's more a case that obviously ReFood can designate it as PAS 110 because they've done all the relevant tests. If it was then to then go on from somewhere else from this lagoon, for instance, that sort of testing regime is gone, and then, well, what status then is it? And it's not definitely saying it would be it would come under that, but there's obviously the possibility, the possibility that it might. But I mean, the relevant, it's pretty much a side issue in the grand scheme of things.
Thank you. So just let me go over this so I'm clear, if that's okay, Chair. So the onward sale is possible. There's nothing to prevent me. It's okay saying I won't do it, but that's like me saying to my missus, I'm only going to have 2 pints when I go out on Saturday. I'm probably not going to do that. So where is there any control? Because you're saying you require planning permission. I don't think you need planning permission for him to sell a product they own. And it certainly wouldn't require licensing from waste. So all I'm looking at is where is that control, where is that in place to stop or to limit the resale of, because which obviously seems to be a concern as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at recommending conditions that basically what's held in that tank is purely for use within that farm holding, within the blue line, and there's a condition recommended to you to include in that would control that aspect.
Thanks for that. Thank you, Chair. That's what I was looking for, that there was a control in place. Thank you.
Would you also clarify that when you mentioned farm holdings, it does mean that it will leave that property and go to other holdings they're responsible for?
Yeah, again, they've provided an updated plan with the blue line on it, and the condition refers to the holding within the blue line. So the 186 hectares that's mentioned in Earthcare's technical statement. Basically, what's in that lagoon will be only used on that land.
Thank you for clarifying it won't be serving any other farms and it will be specifically on that land only. Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Sorry, I just want to clarify this for members. So you'll notice there was a blue line plan that Mark brought up on the screen during his presentation. Condition 3 specifically says that this material can only be used on that area edged in blue, so it's just this farm holding. Okay.
Councillor Hogarth.
Oh. Yeah, it's just, you say, basically, can only be used what they already use. The current holding tank, basically. So why do they need one 5 times bigger if the existing one is big enough to serve that land?
Okay, well, they've calculated that their consultants provided a technical statement which reviewed the last few years when they planted out their crops. In February and March, nearly the whole holding is planted out and requires biofertiliser. So that what they've done is they've calculated what the requirement would be. So what they've been experienced, what they highlighted in that statement is in the past that they've missed the opportunity when the weather was right to basically just get on and fertilise what they needed to at the most opportune time. So by having this lagoon basically filling it to the top by the beginning of February, they've then got to start with 6,000 cubic metres of fertiliser to use as and when they require through February and March, when obviously when the farm is the busiest, without the danger that they run out or have to buy in factory produced fertilizers to make up the shortfall. So that's their justification for requiring a larger storage facility than the mesh tank that they currently have.
Councillor Cox.
How would it be enforced? If it is, I mean, obviously tank's bigger than, I mean, we can assume, obviously, as you've said, that the size of the tank is to keep whatever nasty smelling stuff is in it to last them all year. But how is any of this monitored in any way? And obviously residents aren't happy about this smell. So again, what would regulate it to see that actually the conditions are being upheld? Because they could say, well, we've used more than we needed to, so we've got to get some more in. Could have been sold, who knows? But how would that work?
I mean, again, with much of planning, it's sadly reacting to complaints, investigating, and then, you know, if we find that they've been in breach of those conditions, is you know, seeking either compliance or issuing or going to court to issue fines. From the planning side, obviously, I mean, my colleagues in environmental health, they and also through the odour management plan, the complaints that are recorded by them and then forwarded on. See, the odour management plan requires a lot of data to be recorded and kept for 2 years. So we've got we would have records of the deliveries, and also there's GPS on the spreaders, which I know my colleague has some access to, because the farmer provides provides that in terms of the work they've been doing. So yes, I mean, that's what the conditions are for, and if they're in breach, then and it's reported to us and we investigate and find that they are in breach, then action can be taken.
We're looking at here, aren't we, an application that you can't monitor. You can't really tell where this smell's going to go. It depends on which way wind's blowing. So again, things could be sent in from residents saying, yeah, we've got this smell. You don't really know where it's coming from. So it just seems it seems really odd to me that yes, we've got this oversized tank where there's one working already. We know that's fine, but it just seems odd to me about how it can be regulated. And you'd show me that it is something that the numbers and information's there to be regulated. So would it be possible that some kind of regular checks kept on it?
Find me button. Thanks, Councillor. Just to reiterate a couple of things that were picked up in the speakers' presentations about the capacity and why it's required over the existing bladder tank. So as Fiona alluded to, the capacity has been assessed in the sense that the Earthcare technical summary that came through, the capacity has been calculated compared to what is being grown at Red House Farm. The entire holding is 1,600 acres, to the extent that it's just under a third of the total land holding. And it says in the technical note that a much larger lagoon, i.e. 3 times the size, would have been required to serve the entire land holding. And it talks about, well, that's not logistically, it's not ideal anyway, but essentially there's justification to show why a size of the lagoon is required at Red House Farm that Mark sets out in his report. Just turning to ongoing management and monitoring and management of the odour, let's be clear, primarily this is a result of spreading, which, although it's been covered in the presentation, as Mark's put out in his report, the act of spreading on agricultural land isn't necessarily, well, it's not a material planning consideration, and that's backed up by case law, including the appeal decision that you can read within documentation. But looking at the OMP is extensive. It includes a methodology behind how odour is monitored on site on a daily basis. It sets out how records are kept, which will be made available and if necessary, reviewed by the local planning authority. It identifies that you have to determine the source of the odour complaint. It sets out in table 5.1 a summary of the mitigation measures, and if you go through them, it's quite extensive in terms of the management and monitoring of odour from the site as a result of the lagoon in operation. It sets out the responsibility of who is required to carry out that monitoring, and there's some contingencies also in the OMP that sets out what happens if there's a emergency or the person who usually checks isn't working that particular day. It sets out the odour complaints procedure in the event that a complaint is received. The first port of call is our colleagues in environmental health, but also the OMP sets out consultation with the community as well. All of these measures and more are included in the OMP and is condition 5 of the summary of the report in Mark's presentation. So if you read through the OMP, it is extensive in how odour is dealt with and monitored on the site, and in the event a complaint's raised, how it's then dealt with.
Yeah, Councillor Cox, then we will go to Councillor Stapleton then.
Sorry, Gary. Yeah, I take on board what you say, but the report states about what's being grown on different parcels of land and what's needed for different parcels of land. When you look at page 47, it shows you in 22, going from 20 to 23, the amounts within each parcel of land has changed. And I've no doubts that they're going to keep changing. So, that report is only valid, surely, at this point in time, because then it's going to change. Is that right? Is that the right assumption to make?
Well, I think in that table, I think it's the table that you're referring to, you'll see that each of those crops are all grown at the very least in March. So even though the proportions of each crop might change through crop rotation in different fields, actually you'll still get a key part of the year in the spring where pretty much the whole of that farmland is being grown on and requires to be fertilised.
May I just make one more, please?
Last comment, and then we're
Last
going to
one, I promise, Chair. Actually, in 2020, there were no rapeseed oil at all on there. Everything was something else.
It could be that sometimes on a fault you leave one field fallow, don't you? Empty.
I mean, the other thing as well, yes, it's got a capacity of 6,000 cubic metres, but there's not necessarily a requirement to fill it, to the brim. And also the 30 to 60, also the 30 cubic metres is actually the minimum, assessed in I think in the previous year, in the Arthur statement, they talked about that it was, ideally they'd have, that the requirement ideally would have been a lot higher than, would have been a lot closer to that, effectively that 60 than the 30. So yeah, I mean, it is going to change from year to year.
Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. As we're in a period of debate, I just want to go over a couple of things, make sure I've got my head round this, and obviously, Mark, if you want to clarify just by nodding your head as we go, that I'm happy with that. First of all, I'd like to agree with the Officer for Environmental Health. I mean, I live in a rural area. I regularly smell this. I don't particularly find it offensive. Also, my ward is, I think we've got 4 farms within my ward, of which they use it, and I don't get a single complaint about it. It may go to environmental health, I don't know, but I'm not getting any complaints. Just to clarify as well, if this was refused, this digestate would still be applied to the land at the same level, regardless of whether this is approved or not, because the crops still need to grow, the farmer still needs to grow. It's just the difference is he's going to have to bring it in, which would mean a massive increase in the number of vehicles. Am I right in assuming that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the spreading would carry on as it has over the last 4 or 5 years that the farmers been using it. and obviously they won't have, by the tank won't provide, it is smaller, will provide some capacity, but wouldn't provide the capacity that the lagoon does at the start of the the season for spreading. So yeah, I don't disagree with much of, I don't disagree with what you've said.
So, indulge me, Chair. So basically, the key point I'm making here is that the biggest difference is going to be, if this is approved, will be a reduction in the amount of lorries having to access the site to bring digestate in from elsewhere, because they're actually producing it on site. Is that correct?
No, it still have to be brought in from refood. It's not. This farmer doesn't have animals, so it's not like spreading waste from his own farm on his own land. But obviously the difference in movements are that we've got different access. The movements don't need to come through the centre of the village. They don't need to come down the bridleway. So in terms of access, that is the main difference.
Thank you, Mark. That's where I was going. Thank you, Chair.
Does any other Councillor Hogarth?
If you've got this bigger tank or whatever you want to call it, would it mean the substance being held for longer? Maybe the longer it's held, the more smell you might get out of it, or will that dissipate over time? Well, from the product that's in the tanks.
Yes. Over the winter when you can't spread, and they're sort of building up the capacity to basically start in earnest in February and March. It's inevitable that they'll be held there for longer. But the tank itself has a solid cover, and it will vent only very slightly when it's being filled. So that shouldn't make a great deal of difference.
Councillor Beach.
Yes, thank you. If we refuse this, he obviously can still keep using the tank which he has got at the moment, and it isn't sufficient. Would he be able to supplement his need for fertiliser with chemical fertiliser? Either, you see them on farms with liquid spraying, but also you see them flinging powdery stuff into the air, which must be blow in all directions if it's the wrong time. Would he would have to supplement it. Do we know with what?
I don't. There are alternatives for storing it using bladder bags, which you can just lay on the ground, for instance, beside the road, and the tanker comes and fills those up, and then you discharge from them. So you could still have the get that capacity from still from refood. Obviously, it's less convenient, and also from a highways point of view, you then liable to have a tanker parked by the side of a road on a country lane, blocking the road while they discharge the contents into the bladder bag. So which is probably less ideal than having a purpose-built lagoon. For the alternatives, I don't really have the expertise to advise on that.
For my chair, am I correct in saying that we went down the road of discussing that originally before when the bladder tank came before us? That one of the things was the quantity and these tanks along the side of the road, and I think we dismissed that as an option then, if I remember rightly.
It's a long time ago. I can't remember, Councillor. I mean, I know it's something that's been brought up, and I'm sure, you know, the farmer has actually used them in the past, both the ones on the ground and also ones suspended from you know, suspended in the farmyard as well. But as for, you know, what we discussed in that committee those years ago, I can't help you with that.
Thanks, Chair. If it helps, the appeal decision appended to the report at paragraph 51 talks about the chemical composition of the digestate. And it talks about, well, the odour given off by digestate, whilst unpleasant, is not known to be noxious. Planning condition could be imposed to limiting the storage to a particular, or the accredited PAS 110 accredited product, which is what's been proposed here. And it concludes, I do not consider the chemical composition of digestate to be a material consideration that weighs against the development.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Thank you. Is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to conditions? Is there a mover for the recommendation, please? Councillor Stapleton. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Farmer. Show of hands of those in favour for the application. That's 5, yeah. Those against? Abstentions. Therefore, that has passed. We'll now take a 5-minute break to give a chance for members of the public that need to leave. It is now 15:01, so just gone 5 past, 15:06, you've got 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Can we have everybody back in the seats now, please? Application number 2 is planning application 21/02115/FULM. It's the erection of 58 dwellings, including formation of a new access from Doncaster Road, landscaping and public open space at land south of Doncaster Road, Harlington. Application, can you hear that? Thank you. Application number 2 is 21/02115/FULM, which is the erection of 58 dwellings, including formation of a new access from Doncaster Road, landscaping and public open space at land south of Doncaster Road, Harlington, Doncaster. Andrew Sudders is the planning case officer that will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start with the pre-committee amendments. We've got speakers for this application. We've got the agent speaking in support, plus their technical experts who will be present to answer any questions. We've got one speaker in opposition on behalf of local residents. There's an amendment to the officer report at paragraphs 8.17 and 8.82. The affordable housing contribution is now £548,188.20. That's following an update. So the application's proposing 58 dwellings, including formation of new access to Doncaster Road, landscaping and public open space. The application's been presented to committee on account of the significant public interest. Just a look at the site. This is the aerial photograph of the site. It's undeveloped agricultural land used as horse paddocks. The top left-hand photograph and the one below is Doncaster Road, and you can just see the existing access into the field. The top right is the site itself, looking down towards the south, and then the bottom photograph is the nearest residential property on the east of the site, which is numbers 96 and 100 Doncaster Road. This is the top left, Mill Lane, the properties that back onto the site. Below that is the pumping station, further down Mill Lane. And then the top right-hand photograph is taken from the site at the access looking towards the backs of properties on Mill Lane. And the bottom photograph is the bottom boundary, the southern boundary along the site, which is adjacent to the green belt. So in policy terms and the principle of residential development, this is the site that's been removed from the green belt and has been allocated for housing in the local plan with a site reference BH01 south of Doncaster Road, Harlington, and it's got an indicative housing capacity of 66 dwellings. The application's received a significant amount of public interest. Objections are set out in paragraph 6.2 of the officer report, with parish council objections set out at paragraph 7.1. Main objections are in relation to flooding and drainage concerns, impact on traffic, impact on local services, the site allocation for housing. All these matters are suitably addressed and resolved within amended plans and submission of further details. There's no objections from consultees, and the application is fully compliant with all local plan policies. So the site's been subject to developer requirements at Appendix 2 of the local plan. This sets out a number of design principles and parameters which should be adhered to, and the application adheres to this. The site's been subject to pre-application discussion and advice. Initially, the application proposed 61 houses, but this is now amended to 58. The site is partly allocated within flood zone 2. This has resulted in design concerns on account of having to raise land levels. Officer concerns were the impact of this on approximately 6 properties on Mill Lane on the southern end of the site. The concerns were regarding overlooking and loss of privacy. Following discussions with the applicant, this issue is now resolved and is overcome as shown on this next slide, which shows the difference in land levels, which is 1.6 metres at most. However, there's increased separation distances here at 30.9 on this bottom, on the bottom cross section, which is a section along 29 Mill Lane to plots 22 and 23. So it's a 30.9 separation distance between backs of properties. The usual requirement is 21 metres back to back. And in addition to this, we've got terracing of gardens, which ensures privacy for those residents on Mill Lane. Overall, the scheme meets or exceeds all separation distances between existing and proposed properties. The scheme provides off-street car parking for each dwelling. All properties meet nationally described internal space standards and meets local plan policy 45 in providing accessibility and adaptable dwellings. In terms of design and appearance, there's a cohesive theme throughout the development, such as white casement windows and reconstituted stone heads and sills with gable detailing reflecting local character. This slide shows the Winslow, which is a 2-bedroomed accessible dwelling, and this is the Tidmidden, a 4-bedroom detached dwelling. External materials will be stone, red brick with red or dark grey roof tiles, which are traditional and in keeping with the village. This slide shows the area of public open space, including the children's equipped area of play. A constraint of this site is the electricity pylon in the southwestern corner. Officers have contacted Northern Power Grid with respect to the proximity of the children's play area, and they advise that they are anti-climb proof and subject to signage. They're satisfied with the play area here in this location. They've also advised they will put the site on a register of interest whereby the safety elements are inspected every 6 months. This is a street visual of the site to give an impression of how the houses would look. So overall, the scheme is providing all the usual Section 106 contributions. National policy requires compensation where a site's removed out of Greenbelt, and as such with this site there would be a payment of £50,000 which will be made and would be spent on improvements to the remaining Greenbelt land at Dennerby Ings. Public open space provision is just below the 15% requirement, so making a top-up to financial contributions required, and in this case the monies will be spent on a piece of equipment at the Church Lane Park play area. There's a 23% affordable housing provision with 5 units on site and the remainder as a financial contribution. And finally, an education contribution. All the Section 106 contributions are set out at paragraph 8.81 of the officer report. So in summary, This is an allocated housing site, so residential use is supported on this site. There's no objections from consultees, including drainage, Yorkshire Water, the Environment Agency, the Council's ecologist, the Open Space Officer, the Highways Officer, the Strategic Housing Officer, and the application's fully compliant with all local plan policies. As such, the officer recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Andrea. We have Mr. Simon Hepworth, a member of the public, who has requested to speak in opposition to the application. If you'd like to come down to the front. Yeah. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute it once you've completed your submission, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
I am here today to speak to the Planning Committee as an objector to this development. I speak for myself and local residents who share the same views and have registered their objections already. Although we do feel we may be wasting our time, as Harron Homes must already believe this has been passed, as they are advertising these properties on their website already. Harron clearly believe the values of this Planning Committee before us today are irrelevant. I do hope the Planning Committee give our objections serious consideration. Harlington is a small village of approximately 350 homes. A development of this size crammed onto this small area will have a harmful impact on the living conditions of neighbouring dwellings, highway safety and drainage. When the land was changed from Greenbelt to Brownfield, the council's reasoning behind this was a need for housing in the area. We were disappointed at losing our green meadows, but could possibly see a requirement for small affordable houses for first-time buyers or bungalows for older residents to downsize. This development does not meet any of these needs and is of an unacceptable scale. The type of houses Harron is proposing and prices will no doubt be owned by working families with 2 cars, potentially 3 or 4. There is little or no room within this development for parking of all these cars. The only plan I can see with cars pictured on it is the landscape master plan, where I cannot believe they have cars parked along the main route in and out the site onto Doncaster Road. Maybe we should add 120 cars for residents, a few cars of visitors, the Amazon and grocery delivery vans and a bin truck, and then see how bad this site will look. The overflow for any additional car parking will spill out onto Doncaster Road, obstructing traffic flow and impacting highway safety. The traffic survey was done in 2021 when there were little traffic on the road as we were dealing with the pandemic. The call centres were closed and many people were working from home. This survey should be disregarded and at the very least a new one carried out. The planning officers reverted back to a survey done in 2019. We all know how traffic has increased over the last 4 years. We ourselves know how hard it is to enter and exit Mill Lane in the morning. When all these additional cars head out of the village, the main routes are Mar to the A1 and High Melton to Doncaster. All along these routes there's bottlenecks and accident black spots where impatient drivers take a chance and accidents occur. Queuing traffic starts at the Crown. When you head to Mar, it backs up along Blacksmith's Lane. Sprotborough Road is a slow crawl. None of us use the route at Hickleton as it's far too dangerous in the morning. The worst accident black spot is the junction of Ludwell Hill, where collisions occur regularly. Harlington and Barnborough have grown over the last 2 decades, and for us on Mill Lane, the drainage infrastructure has not grown with it. Sewage pumping station on Mill Lane used to be able to cope. Now we have issues weekly. On the worst occasions, when both pumps fail, the holding tank quickly fills up and sewage backs up into our gardens, including our own property, as we are the lowest. Having an extra 58 houses worth of sewage will only escalate this problem. In recent years, we have had 3 severe floods and have had to battle to keep water out of our home and garden. It's nice how Harron Homes has addressed this issue by raising their new houses 6 foot, so what was once a flat meadow capable of holding standing water is now a flood bank directing water to our properties. It's also noted how the developer acknowledges these issues by allocating this area to affordable homes, and the electricity pylon would obviously cause mortgage issues. Harron Homes and Doncaster Council Planning have made no attempt to consult with the villagers and the Parish Council of
1 minute
Harlington.
remaining.
I'll keep us informed of any amendments. The lack of developers' consideration for the village is evident, citing new houses so close to existing dwellings, ripping out garden hedges and redirecting surface water. Where is the respect for the hierarchy? Most people thought that after the initial advertisements and street notices went up in August 21, this plan had been dropped. Only a few of us saw the amendments of just 3 weeks ago go online, and in fact, we had to quickly look into this. We had little time to prepare or spread the word. There is not one positive benefit this development will bring to our village, yet so many negatives that make no sense whatsoever. The scale and quantity of houses, the types of houses, the impact on local residents, the strain on our local services like schools and GPs, the drainage and flooding, the traffic and highway safety, the planning process and times of this application, the fact that it's been portrayed as a done deal already. I do hope the planning committee can see sense and help get our village what we need.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions for Mr. Hepworth? Thank you for your submission, Mr. Hepworth.
Thank you.
Mr. Richard Holliday, the agent, has requested to speak in support of the application. We've also got Mr. Phil Owen, Sam Chapman. Sorry, ignore that bit. It's now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press a large red button when you want to speak, and again to mute your microphone when you've concluded, and we'll let you have 1 minute warning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. As Andrea has already explained, we're proposing a full planning application for 58 dwellings on a site which the Council has already allocated through its local plan process for residential development. The Council adopted that local plan in 2021, and the site is allocated for the purposes of residential development. It may have been Greenbelt previously, but through that local plan adoption process, it has been allocated for housing. The Council's 5-year housing land supply, as of 1st of April 2022, so just last year, expects this site to be developed within years 4 and 5 of the local plan period. Alongside that, the Council's target is to deliver 920 dwellings per annum, and as such, this land forms quite an important part of the Council's 5-year housing land supply and will provide a valuable contribution towards meeting the Council's identified housing need. And it will provide a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings, including some affordable housing provision on site and off-site contribution as identified by the Council. Given that the site is allocated for housing, it's considered that the principle of residential development is considered to be acceptable and would meet the relevant local and national planning policies. In terms of the technical details, the proposals have been through various amendments, as council officers and residents are aware. As part of those amendments, the site layout and the design of dwellings has been amended, and that was to address site-specific development requirements set out within the local plan policies, but also technical requirements in lieu of, in response to consultee comments and queries. And all of the consultees are now happy that the proposal meets relevant policies and guidance. As I've mentioned, the scheme includes a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bed houses. It meets the minimum separation distances, and I believe in most cases exceeds those minimum separation distances set out within the developer guidance between habitable room windows of the existing neighbouring houses and those of the proposed new build properties, which should safeguard the amenity of residents. In terms of the design, there's been a few site-specific design requirements, and we believe that the scheme responds positively to the site context and the local character of the area. The proposed dwellings will be constructed from stone, red brick with red and dark grey roof tiles. They will have a traditional appearance and are in keeping with the village and the local character. You've seen one of the street scene CGI images, which shows how the houses will sit within the street scene. And the urban design officer from the council has confirmed that those proposed house types, the design of them, the appearance, the layout of the site, are all policy compliant and in some instances go beyond the requirements of those policies. The site will include various landscaping mitigation measures. There will be a mixture of retained hedges and trees along the eastern and western boundaries, and then there'll be new boundary planting along the southern boundary to retain the green character and a defensible boundary for the adjacent green belt, which is in accordance with the site development requirements set out in the local plan policy. Access to the site will be from a single access point onto Doncaster Road. Transport statement has been submitted with the application and confirms there will be no adverse highway safety effects. The single access from the highway
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Corresponds with 2 parking spaces per dwelling plus visitor spaces in line with policy requirements. In terms of the flood risk, at the time of the application submission, the site was primarily within flood zone 1. Due to the Environment Agency updating their flood maps during the application process, part of the site does fall within flood zone 2, and I believe 6 houses are within that. The Environment Agency, Yorkshire Water and the council's drainage team have all assessed the submitted flood risk assessment and the drainage details and confirmed that they are happy with the scheme and that it will remain safe throughout its life and will not cause adverse flooding, flood risk or increased flood risk elsewhere. Given the fact that drainage details, the finer drainage details will be reserved by details by condition, they've raised no objection to the development. We know that some objectors have raised concerns with highways and drainage, but the consultees, the respective consultees, have raised no issues and are happy with the proposed scheme as amended.
Thank you for that. Your time is now up.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to go over to the committee members if they've got any questions, but I'd just like to make you aware, first of all, that as well as Mr. Holliday, who's the agent, we have Mr. Phil Owen, Sam Chapman from Highways Optima, Mr. Keith Emmett, Flood Risk and Drainage Eastwards, in attendance that can answer any technical questions, so you're just aware. So, first of all, Councillor Beach, then Councillor Anderson.
Just going back to the car parking, did you say 2 car parkings? Oh, sorry. Yeah, did you? I thought you said Bob first. Did you say 2 car parking spaces per dwelling?
Yeah.
Sorry. Right. I'm looking at an extract from the newspaper which says Heron Homes started advertising properties at Harlington on their website 2 weeks ago, and I know that's a fact. Councillor Cox here has just shown me, and yet the plans hadn't been here. This has angered many locals who feel it's been a done deal with Doncaster Council all along. Now, I'm sure other members of the committee find it reprehensible that you should do that. It does make Doncaster Council and us as councillors of the planning committee look as though we are being operated like marionettes, which is not the case. Therefore, I ask, why did you do that? It's not the done thing.
That's perhaps not a question for me as the planning agent, but I think something we have to consider is that developers, house builders do need to have some certainty, and they will need to firstly test the market. They've got a scheme that they've worked with the council over a number of months. They've gone through various revisions. We have an allocated housing site, so there is a presumption that a housing scheme will come forward on that site because it is allocated. House builders have to have some certainty, so they will be marketing the site on a presumption, yes, of achieving planning permission, but they have to be able to test the market, test what the desirability, the interest would be in that site, and it's not assuming that councillors will vote in favour of it. You may choose not to, but we have to look at it that it is an allocated housing site within the local plan, and it's expected to come forward. You know, the local plan and the housing need identifies it coming forward sooner rather than later. So there is an expectation on the developer's side that it would be developed at some point.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cox.
Well, sorry, I'm going to go straight for it. I can't support this at all because of that statement made. Is there any? I mean, there's obviously been planning issues before with this authority, and I think just that statement nailed it for me. So I'm against this. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment that it's irrelevant to what's being put in the paper? We have to make a decision. I understand your viewpoint, and but by rights, the decision has got to be made on the information and the merit of the project in front of us. Councillor Anderson.
I agree with Councillor Cox. I just feel as those on the planning committee are put in an awful position when this has been done if we agree to it.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, I just want to clarify a couple of things to members. I'm not quite sure what it is you're objecting to. If it's the fact that the developer has decided to advertise that this site may come forward subject to planning permission, that isn't a reason to refuse the application. This is an allocated site. If you want to refuse the application, we need to have material planning reasons, please.
But it puts us in a position that we have already made our mind up.
I can understand planning committee's assumption that based on the article that's been released, it does make it look like that it's already been agreed. However, as a planning committee, we have to ignore that and we have to go on the information that's been based before us. And like I say, if for any reason that it needs to be a material consideration as why to reject the application. I'm just going to go to Councillor Stapleton, then I'll come back to you, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question, really, to the agent. Sorry. So we've got 2 spaces per dwelling for cars, and then 1 visitor space for 4 dwellings, which works out to 14.5. Where will those 14.5 cars park? Pure. I'm not saying there isn't space, but from what I've provided here, I can't see where those 14.5 car spaces are.
Is there a layout you can put on the screen, please? Yeah, so it's a combination of, the access roads are 5.5 metres wide, the carriageway. So what the highways officer has asked for is 5.5 metre carriageways and then 2.5 metre footways. And the reason for that is sometimes people do, when they park on street, so a 5.5 metre carriageway is sufficient to park on street as a visitor and still obviously be able to safely pass both by a car and a refuse vehicle when that needs to get past. But even if occasionally people still park on the footway, but you've got the wider footways to accommodate that. So the actual access road width is more than sufficient to accommodate visitor parking.
So just to clarify, because I mean, obviously I've got that in this pack. You know, maybe it's just me, but that just looks like a kaleidoscope of colours, and I can't really see it. So I'm assuming the vehicles, therefore, on there are those black sort of ant-like figures, like in the top left-hand corner, the entranceway. So is the parking on road parking going to be restricted to certain areas, or there's a free-for-all?
Councillor Stapleton, Andrew's going to point them out for you.
Yeah, I just want to know if it's a free-for-all parking, or is it just in those spaces?
These are cars parked within the streets. Look at the top there. That's cars parked in the streets as well. And then you've got the visitor parking bays dotted around the site there. And there's a few more further up. I can't reach, but basically it's capacity parking within the streets, within the development site.
Yeah, it's a combination of on-street parking. As I say, the infrastructure and the access road is of more than sufficient width to accommodate that, but there also are some dedicated visitor parking spaces sort of off the carriageway. So it's a mixture of both, which is typical of residential streets.
Thank you. It's just because obviously with the diagram and even that is really hard to see. So I mean, thank you, Andrew, because I didn't realise there was actually some parking spaces that are off-road. On the off-road ones, is there any provision for EV? Obviously, I can appreciate you're not on the on-road ones, no, but on the off-road parking, is there EV charging points there?
Sorry, do you mean the visitor parking spaces? I would have to double check. I don't probably believe so on street. No, you would never, you would not provide on-street spaces typically within a residential development. All of the properties obviously have EV charging capacity.
Yeah, with respect, I did clarify that and said not the road. I appreciate you're not going to put EV charging points on the road. I was specifically talking about the visitor car parking areas, whether they would have an EV charging point.
No.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Cox.
So I'd just like to make the point that it's not just the article that Councillor Beach pointed out, it's also online on their site. It's not just one thing.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cox. Do we have any other questions? Right, I'm going to ask the committee members now. We're going to go into debate. Councillor Hogarth? You want to go into ask a question in debate? Okay, we're going to go into debate, which means we can ask the officers and discuss the case between us. So, Councillor Hogarth.
Right, 8.85. And that's when we're getting a verbal update. The planning committee. Like it's mentioned in 8.85.
This is in reference to the public open space contribution, isn't it? Yeah. So, as I mentioned in my presentation, it's a total sum of £4,228. That's the financial contribution top-up payment to make up the shortfall in on-site provision of public open space. And it's been indicated by the area manager and the parish council that the play area on Church Lane will be where that money is spent. It will be going on a piece of play equipment. As yet, the play equipment is unidentified, but it will be spent on a piece of play equipment.
Councillor Beach.
This isn't really a question. It's page 101. It is impossible to read. The chart at the top, left and bottom right, they're so tiny. Is it possible, from a computer point of view, to separate these out so we can actually read them? I mean, I couldn't even read it if I'd got a magnifying glass. It might be car parking spaces, it might be house types. I have no idea. It is that tiny. Can something be done in future that we can be able to read the things properly?
Thank you for that, Councillor Beach. I totally agree with you. It may be an idea that if the legend or whatever are done separate on a separate page to identify it, because it is virtually it is impossible to read. I think that it does need to be clearer for planning committee, and I'm sure that's something that will be taken into future consideration. But I appreciate that comment. No, I totally appreciate that. Do we have any other questions, Councillor Stapleton?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, really. Just to clarify, Andrew. Obviously, you just mentioned the parish council indicated what they'd like the money to be spent on, etc. And obviously, I've looked at that they've objected, and it doesn't sit right when you're objecting, but you're willing to take the money. So I've got to ask the question: has the parish council now changed their minds regarding their objections, or is there still some outstanding that they're concerned about?
I'm not aware whether the parish council have changed their minds, but as part of the process, that the internal process for establishing where monies are to be spent, then as part of that process, the neighbourhood manager would be contacting the parish council. And from my information, the officer has contacted the parish council to establish where to spend the money and to confirm which piece of equipment that they want either renewing or replacing.
Yeah, thank you. Because, Chair, if I may, because looking through the objections that they had, and then reading the report, it looks like you've actually covered off just about everything on there. And it was just thinking, well, I just couldn't see why, you know, do we put any weight to their objections when it, from the report, well written, and it shows that just about everything on there that they've objected to has actually been dealt with as part of the process. And it just occurred to me that maybe that they are now happy, and that, you know, that's why they're happy to take the monies as well. So if they've not updated, that's fair enough, but I just wanted to ask. Thank you.
Can I just make it clear for members of the public, you're not allowed to speak or make comment during this part. We've already gone through the stage where if you wanted to make representation, that would have been done. So I just wanted to explain that. Do we have any other questions or comments? No? Okay, is there a proposal to delegate authority to the head of planning to grant planning permission subject to conditions and the signing of a section 106 agreement? Is there a mover for the recommendation? That's been moved by Councillor Stapleton. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? I'll second that. Can we have a show of hands in favour of the application, please? 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Those against? Any abstentions? Therefore, that is passed. Thank you. Application number 3 is planning application 22/02202/FULM, which is the erection of a new medical centre, use class E, with associated car parking, landscaping at land southwest of West End Lane in New Rosington in Doncaster. And Jess Duffield is the planning case officer, which will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll firstly just pick up on some pre-committee amends because some of them have been very recent. We've tweaked the wording of condition 18, which referred to the travel plan, following some discussions between the councillor here today and the developers from the NHS. We'll be able to talk about that in a bit more detail through the speakers which we've got today, which, as I've mentioned, is the local councillor and 2 members of staff from the NHS. So yeah, as mentioned, the developments for a new medical centre off West End Lane in Rosington. I haven't bothered I have been to site, obviously, but I didn't provide any up-to-date photographs of the site itself because it's all boarded off with a fence, so I felt that the photographic images were a bit more informative. As you can see, surrounding the site, it's been undergoing development for a number of years now. So we've got the residential housing just to the north of the site, then to the side of the site, the future residential development will come forward, so they're sort of still in the through the system. And the site itself sits to the south of the road, which is quite a long, narrow site, and then with the woodland area to the south of that. In terms of its policy allocation within the adopted local plan, the site sits within the ROS1 housing allocation. There's not an actual dedicated policy in the local plan, given that most of the site is built out. And like I say, it falls within the housing allocation. However, it is referred to as being potentially used as a community or health facility in the outline permission, which was approved in 2012. So this is just an extract of that, again, which shows the site in that orange colour, which is clearly labelled as a site for a potential health centre. And I've also included an extract from the committee report, which, like I said, went to planning committee back in 2012 for the wider outline master plan. And as you can see within that, it does refer to this site being used potentially for a group of GPs seeking to relocate in this area. So the site, the principle of this site and its use has already previously been established. Oh, sorry, I've skipped a slide. So just to go into a bit more detail about what the medical centre, sort of how it will operate. There's 2 existing GP surgeries within Rosington already, which is the West End Clinic and the Rosington practice, which I've highlighted on that slide. These 2 clinics and the buildings themselves have been found to be in quite a poor condition now, and as part of that, the NHS have sort of identified these surgeries as needing replacing, and as part of that, this new facility and new building has been proposed. So the building itself has capacity not only to hold these 2, sort of to accommodate these 2 medical centres, it's also allowed for some additional capacity in relation to the recent residential developments within this part of Rosington, so sort of has allowed for the recent growth within the area. So the proposal itself, sort of, obviously I said, sits within this site with the building at one side and the generous parking area at the other. like I said, it's going to use the existing access, which is already off West End Lane, which was installed as part of that road link construction. And then there's a second pedestrian access from both either ends of the site, sort of a more central one and one next to that access, which again improves accessibility to a wide, sort of a larger area of the community. So just to highlight again, just to zoom in a bit more on the building itself, we've got a matte boundary treatment along the edge, which has been designed to match those houses, sort of the boundary treatment to the north of the houses. In terms of the impact upon residential amenity, that's extremely limited. Like I said, there's a road and then a quite a generous separation distance between the building itself and the nearest properties. And again, just the an idea of the car park here. So we've got landscaping, EV charging points, and like I said, a central footpath through the site as well. We've only had 2 representations received for this application. The only reason it's being presented to Planning Committee is in regards to the council's interest in the land. So the council are currently purchasing the land, and that's to do with the funding and how that's implemented, which again, that the applicants here today can probably go into a bit more detail of, but from my understanding, the NHS funding can only be used on publicly owned sites. And then in terms of, like I said, the 2 representations we've had were mainly in terms of the connectivity of the site and its accessibility. So I've highlighted here sort of the nearest bus stops where they're located. So one's a 5-minute walk and one's a 4-minute walk. And that's a bus service which sort of goes through Rosington along West End Lane. We've had a few revisions of the plans which have been submitted. The main changes to the submitted sort of proposal was the location of the entrance foyer. Originally, this was located more sort of a bit more centrally located, which meant that it sort of meant you had to go through the car park to access it, whereas this now more corner position means the building can be seen and is more visible from both West End Lane and from the car park. So just creates a more entrance and welcoming sort of appearance to the building. So as you can see, they've got a mixture of materials, which are all very modern, sort of use of render and brick, which replicates the materials which is used on the surrounding residential developments. And the signage which is shown, that's the only thing which may sort of change slightly depending on exactly what they call it. And again, this is the elevation from West End Lane, and it's sort of got those modern appearing coloured panels, as well as use of render and brick. Again, just flicking through these once again, how it'll look. Like I said, we've got, the only slight thing is, again, you can just see on that plan that boundary treatment has since been reduced to a lower boundary treatment, as I showed, to match what's along the northern boundary of West End Lane. And then just the floor plans, just wanted to highlight these because, again, they sort of show how the 2 GP surgeries will operate together. So you've got Rosington Medical Practice in sort of the redder, pinker colours, and then the West End Clinic within the greener colours. And the shared areas in blue, and the shared areas are mainly just sort of toilets, waiting areas, changing rooms, things like that. So again, you sort of see it's got capacity for both the existing GP surgeries. They will simply just swap over to this building. And like I said, that's been accommodated within how the layout of it. So you've got a ground floor, a first floor, and then again, additional consultation rooms on the second floor. We've got no outstanding consultee objections. The drainage team, along with the EA and Yorkshire Water, Severn Trent Water, have no objections to this development. We've also achieved the BNG requirements of this. Obviously, Policy 30B in the local plan looks for plus 10% biodiversity net gain, and in this site we're achieving 36.8% biodiversity net gain, so it exceeds our targets in terms of that as well. In terms of landscaping, all that's been sort of worked through with the urban design officer, tree officer, and all that's been improved through the site and through the conditions as well. So just overall, just to conclude exactly what's happening on this site, so it's the replacement and modernisation of 2 existing GP surgeries, and the building will also provide additional space for the projected patient growth following the recent residential development and expansion of the Rosington area. Has a modern building with sustainable features. It's got air source heat pumps within part of the land as well. And the site's quite well connected to the existing and growing communities in Rosington, sort of centrally located. Obviously, the site, as I pointed out at the start, it's already been identified in the outline master plan as being used as a health centre. So the purpose of using this site for that use is sort of already been established, and we've got no objections from internal or external consultees. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jess. We've got Councillor Rachel Blake, who is a ward member, has requested to speak in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak, and again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just to clarify, I'm not here to speak in opposition to a primary care centre. My concerns relate to the location due to the number of people that have contacted us and the number of people that responded to the NHS survey, nearly 50% concerned about the location. The three things I am keen to have addressed is that we pursue South Yorkshire Authority to provide additional bus stops closer to the centre, and I will come on to that. Recognised through condition 18, this is about addressing health inequalities due to its location, which will mean a substantial number of people who walk to the surgery will no longer be able to access it, and therefore will need assistance to be able to get there. And also to consider what can be included in that condition 18 to make sure that everyone can access this new facility. I fully understand how difficult it has been for the NHS to obtain funding to get a new primary care centre in Rosington, and this is incredibly welcome, and I would like to thank the NHS team for achieving this, for their tenacity to making sure that we're one of only a few sites in South Yorkshire that will get the funded. I also am very aware of how precarious that funding is. So it is important that the decision that's made today secures that funding but enables people to access the primary care centre. I'm aware that the planning officer referred to 2 people who responded, but to the survey that was done by the NHS, over 350 people responded, and just under 50%, 48%, were concerned about the location, because it is a 10-minute walk away from one practice and a 20 to 25-minute walk away from another. That's my walk-in with trainers, and I consider myself quite fit. So for some people, it's a 45 to 60-minute walk to be able to access this new centre. I'm saying walk-in because the survey showed us that a number of people used, the vast majority of people used to walk to actually get to the centre. The buses, I do have to say, I think the diagram shown was a little misleading because it will require people to cross over the road to be able to get back into the village. This is a road that has an Amazon depot at either end. It has waste lorries, about 50 an hour, and it also is a few metres away from a huge industrial estate. I struggle to cross this road, and again, I'm fit and well. And it's the main access road out of the village and connects to the Great Yorkshire Way and M18. So having bus stops closer to the centre would mean that people who do use the bus would be able to access the centre, because where the bus stops are now, that is a huge barrier, and that is what they are telling us. I have to also say that this is not in the centre of the village. 100 metres over, and it would be in another ward. And for some people, this is going to be over 2 miles away. So what I would like to see in that condition 18 is that we provide a passenger transport service that is free, does not stigmatise anybody who has mobility needs, that it's easily accessible and doesn't rely on a complicated booking system, because people would not access the system if it did. My third point is I can see the NHS team are here, and we have already had discussions, but we are really concerned as ward members, because of the people that have contacted us, that we get this patient transport service right, we get the bus stops better located, so people can get easily off the bus, easily into the primary care centre and get back onto another bus, so that everybody benefits from this amazing investment into Rosington, which is a fantastic new primary care centre, but without addressing the access.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. The accessibility issues, then we are depriving a huge number of people that live in perhaps some of our wards, where the need is most. So access is a key that has to be addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blake. Do we have any questions for Councillor Blake? Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Rachel. I just want to go over a couple of things. Obviously, you mentioned about the NHS survey. It's not included in here, so obviously you appreciate we can't take that into consideration. And I'm just looking at this, that 50 local people attended a public exhibition on the 28th of February this year, of which from there only 2 sort of objected. So I'm not sure whether there's been a change of heart, change of mind, or whatever. But my main question really is regarding the outline master plan, because I would have thought as ward members and also the local population, that would have been the most appropriate time to try and get a change of location, etc. Were you consulted on that, and did you make any representation?
Thanks very much, Councillor Stapleton. And in terms of the consultation, it was a very wet, rainy night, and a number of residents contacted us to say they couldn't attend. The big issues that were discussed, which are reflected in the response and the report that you have, was a pharmacy and also access, because people didn't feel that they would be able to get there. I can only assume that people used the NHS survey as a way to voice their concerns, not about a primary care centre, but as I say, about the location. In terms of the outline plan, yes, 2012, I wasn't the councillor then, but that's when it was agreed there was a primary care centre. So we've always expected that there be a primary care centre there. And when I first met with NHS colleagues to understand how that would develop, we had the biggest surprise to realise that the 2 centres were going to relocate into that one. That's the issue. If one of the others carried on, and it wouldn't be so far for people to get there, then people wouldn't be, I wouldn't be here now. It's simply because we expected that perhaps the other 2 would remain, or 1 would remain, and the 1,500 houses that are now being built on that estate might have their own primary care centre, or there would be some reconfiguration. I think that's been the surprise. But I fully understand in terms of the NHS and GP practices why that decision has been made. But yes, we know it was in the plan, but not quite what we expected.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it, because like you, I wasn't elected at the time, and I wasn't aware of it. But I'm grateful for the information you give. Thank you, Chair. No further questions.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, it's just one comment really regarding if we had a GP, if we had a pharmacist in the building, it would mean the pharmacists in the village would close. And that's the worry about having pharmacists in these NHS buildings.
Thank you, Councillor Hogarth. My understanding is that we actually had as ward members enquiries from pharmacists who wanted to be there and carry on providing the pharmacy service in the practice. My concern is if there isn't a pharmacy there as well, then you have again this 25-minute. So you've walked to the doctor, you're not too well. You walk back 25 minutes to the pharmacy, and then you perhaps walk another 20 minutes home. I'd struggle if I wasn't well. If I had mobility issues and other long-term conditions, then that would be my concern. But my understanding is that there are some assurances that pharmacy is being looked at, but I'll leave that for the NHS colleagues. We need both. You know, we've got, as I said before, we've got 1,200 new houses coming on that new estate, who at the moment, other than a Lidl, have no facilities.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, Rachel, just a quick question. How many people have actually contacted you about concerns for this?
I would say it's the main conversation that I've had. I've been a councillor now since 2015, and other than when I've been in planning before in terms of the developments of Bankwood Lane, it's a concern that people raise. And it's not always people that can't access it themselves. It's people saying, I'm in my 70s, I drive now, but what happens when I can't drive? That's their biggest concern. And when we actually we have an update that we put in our local magazine, huge numbers of people contacted us to say, we didn't get to the consultation, but these are our concerns. I have to say again, though, that everybody then says, of course, we welcome a primary care centre. If you can sort out getting us there, then it's something that's great for the village.
Do we have any other questions for Councillor Blake? Thank you for your time. We now have Mr Simon Barnes and Mr Anthony Fitzgerald from NHS South Yorkshire that have requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes collectively. Please press the large red button when you want to speak, and again to mute the microphone when you've concluded, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to come to the committee today. I'm Anthony. I work for NHS South Yorkshire, and my colleague Simon, who's been leading the development of this proposal in Rosington. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Blake. We do agree this is an exciting opportunity for health, for improving health and care within Rosington for its residents and its patients, and we think there's fantastic potential to bring modern day GP practice into the area, which is wider than the traditional healthcare model. So I think best really if I just address some of the concerns that Councillor Blake and Councillor Anderson, and we've been in dialogue accordingly. We are committed to doing a lot more work with local communities, with support from Health Watch, local councillors and community groups to identify some solutions to some of the concerns that raised. And if I just go through a few of those, we mentioned pharmacy. So we're in dialogue with community pharmacists at the moment. I think there's significant potential both for on-site pharmacy, but also working with community pharmacists to make sure that there's that there's adequate supply around that area, and also use of online pharmacy where appropriate. Recognise that's not for everybody, but where it can be worked, we'll increase the offer there. We want to do some more work on digital exclusion, and we're doing some good work in Doncaster on that at the moment about increased use of things like the NHS app, etc., and really going out into our communities and educating people accordingly with that. We're going to work with Primary Care Doncaster, who are a sort of conglomerate of our GP practices, to look at locations of the health bus. Councillors might have seen that out and about on their patch, and we'll do some more of work in that. We will continue to work with the council on the setting of the bus stops, and I can give my commitment to do whatever I can from an NHS perspective to try and lobby accordingly for that. And then I think most importantly is that we will commit to conversations with a transport offer, which Rachel you mentioned is free, is accessible, that addresses the needs of our population who may, as you've identified, travel a little bit further to this practice. And I hope councillors can recognise that we are committed to addressing health inequalities in Doncaster, and I can see potential for this site to really get to the heart of addressing those health inequalities, not only through the accessibility, which I feel strongly we can do something about, but also in the service that we provide out of that building, which I think could be a lot wider than your traditional GP practice. So really working with carers, etc., to be able to do something in that. So yes, a commitment to look at the accessibility, but we feel that this really would be of great benefit to our residents. Simon can answer any technical questions if councillors have them.
Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Stapleton, then Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Cox.
I've just got one question, and then probably a potential to follow up one. If approved, at what point will this actually open and be active?
So we've currently got, from an NHS perspective, we've currently got the outline business case approved. So the money's now been ring-fenced, if you like, for this project. We've now got to go through a final business case, which means securing planning, getting all the legal documentation in place and all that sort of stuff. So long and short of it, we're aiming to try and get that over the line by the end of this year, which means a start on site building-wise early next spring. And we're looking at probably a 14-16 month build programme. So we're talking spring, summer 25, yeah.
Thank you, and I've just got supplementary to that. Can I get an appointment, please? Be very quick in my practice. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Like Rachel, I mean, I'm chuffed to bits. There's going to be a new health centre and that. Who won't want that? But obviously, it's accessibility for, like I say, we're inundated. But just you said commit to the transport offer, you know, the accessibilities. How likely is that to happen, though? Will we get different modes of transport?
Well, we've got examples of where we have, Councillor Anderson, haven't we? So we've done a lot of work about getting patients to cancer clinics. We've done some work where we've put on transport for people to get to Mexborough, for example, ophthalmology clinics, that sort of thing. So we've got precedent. And you know, when I say commit, I think what I'm saying is that we will look at all plausible options, and we've got. So what makes us spring? So 18 months, 2 years to make sure that we engage with our residents and put on appropriate access offers, and we could shape the service around that. You know, and work with the GPs to say actually if there's a particular clinic that addresses some of our hard to reach populations, that we can shape the service around that and then make the transport appropriate for it.
So just in a nutshell, things will happen then. Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Would there be any other providers within that building? So, you know, for other practices or other foot clinics, for example?
So the two practices are not just, it's not a lift and shift. What we've done is we've talked to practices and looked at ways of redesigning the service model, and which that needs to obviously progress as they get their feet under the table and in. But we're not just looking at lift and shift in delivering the same type of services. There's enough space to take into account growth in the housing plus any future growth over the next 20 or 30 years. The other thing to think about is that primary care network, which is a wider kind of sharing of GP surgery practice around a geographical area, has been taken into account, and the space being built into the new facility so the primary care network colleagues can operate from that facility.
That's great. My concern again is through accessibility, because our ward, Finningley, which is just next door, and if there's services that our residents would be able to get to, they again are not going to be able to get there by public transport, because they'd have to come into town to come back out again to go something that's potentially 2-3 miles. But again, you know, if it's being looked at, that's good.
Thank you. I think there's great potential to bring other health and care services, and wider actually into the building, make some good use of our integrated kind of neighbourhood approach. Equally, we'll work with a practice model to ensure that a potential for outreach as well, you know, into other facilities around that area.
Do we have any other questions? I'd like to thank Councillor Blake for actually attending. I think it's important that work with local councillors for their area, because I think the concerns that have been raised are very much needed to be raised, because residents, Rosington, we've been an old mining area, people with health problems and limitation, would make the transport system is vital that it's got right from the start. And so I appreciate those concerns being brought towards the planning committee, and that you've got a commitment to address them, because it will make a big difference to those residents. And I think it is important that there is that commitment to address these issues that have been raised. So I thank you for that. Therefore, committee members will now go into debate. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the planning case officer a question? Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, on 20 regarding the approved opening times, does that need to be there? I'm just thinking in the event of another, something like COVID or anything, where they may need to operate longer opening hours, and also where there may be public meetings. Is that restricted on using the building for all what it's there for?
Hiya, thank you. I think that came from environmental health, to be honest, in terms of just sort of and helps in terms of the movement sort of in and out of the access, not just the operation of the building. Sort of, it's just quite standard to apply some opening hours to a building of this size. Like I say, it could be something which, if we want it to be open all times, we can sort of suggest removing that condition if that's what you think. It was more in regards to sort of the impacts of residential meeting in terms of sort of the access point, and sort of, even though it's not directly close to houses, just sort of protecting that. But like I said, it's not necessarily a huge issue.
Yeah, I think it would be better if that were removed to allow the NHS basic to use it when it's needed, not just at convenient times.
Right, so therefore, is there a mover for recommendation to grant planning permission subject to conditions? So we'll do that. Do you want me to add that straight on? Yes. And so I'm going to add on to delete the one that limits the time for the access, so that it's for 24-hour. Condition 20, yeah? And add on new condition 18. Thank you, the amendment. So are we happy to move that? Yeah, can we have a seconder? And a show of hands in favour, please. Therefore, that is agreed. Thank you. That's agreed. We'll now move on to the next application. Okay, application number 4. Planning application 22/02194/FUL, extension and alteration to existing dwelling to form 6 one-bedroom flats and conversion of outbuilding to form additional single flat and bike store at 97 Scorthorpe Avenue in Scorthorpe. Mark Ramsey is the planning case officer and will introduce the item. I need to put some in swing.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This proposal seeks permission for the erection of an extension to the existing dwelling at 97 Scorthorpe Avenue to form 6 one-bedroom flats and convert an existing outbuilding also to another flat. This application was originally submitted as an outline, was deferred from Planning Committee on 24th of January for procedural matters, and since then, the application's been updated and advertised as a full application. The application is for an extension, as I mentioned, and is being presented to Planning Committee due to a request from a local ward member. Councillor Hempshall has been unable to attend. A joint letter from Councillors Hempshall and Grace has been provided, and this has been attached at the end of your pre-committee amendments. Just to summarise what was in that letter. So the comments were regarded preference for family homes in that location. Also comment on the size of the flats considered small. The building has had to be required to be boarded up by environmental health on several occasions. And also commented on car ownership among the potential occupants, and also the lack of a parish in that area. There were 7 representations received to the original submission, and the matters raised included change to the character of the area, overshadowing and loss of privacy, increase in density, loss of privacy and insufficient parking, and 3 representations came in through advertising the revised proposal, commenting that the area should be for families, again change to the character of the area and creating flats, overshadowing and high demand for parking. The host dwelling is red brick detached property on the corner of Scorthorpe Avenue and Balham Avenue. The host property is an overgrown garden area to the side and rear, and to the front is brick wall and 2 vehicular accesses as well as pedestrian accesses. There's a detached garage and outbuilding to the western side of the plot and a small garden area to the rear. An application in 2021 for 2-storey side extensions to both side elevations, and construction of boundary wall was not implemented, although is still within the time limit to be commenced and covers the same footprint as development proposed here. The building is as originally built and subsequently incrementally extended as shown in the extract from plans submitted with a 2008 application for redevelopment of the site, again, which wasn't implemented, but is actually, I did put it at the end of the report, and this is also on the screen here, so you can see how it's sort of incrementally grown over the years, and also the part of it that formed the post office, which obviously long since closed, and then the house has essentially subsumed the area that formed the post office. Site is identified within the local plan as residential policy area. Site is within the Scorthorpe settlement. In addition, sites flood zone 1 and therefore low risk of flooding. There are no issues with the principle of considering residential development given the proposal is allocated in a residential policy area. The main use of the building will be to form residential units that will add to the mix of accommodation available in the surrounding area. So rather than one big family home, it will compromise up to 7 one-bed dwellings. Concerns have been raised regarding the density within the area, but a search of applications on the streets surrounding the site has not revealed any similar conversions. The development will result in an enlargement of the building in terms of additional first floor space above the northern eastern projections with bedroom windows facing towards the gardens of neighbouring properties. However, none of the proposed openings shown on the floor plans would be facing towards windows on adjacent properties and would also meet the separation distances for overlooking neighbouring gardens. All windows in the converted outbuilding would face into the amenity area and again not into adjacent gardens. The land levels of the host property are also lower than the adjacent property. Noise would only result from the normal domestic use of the property and the comings and goings of residents. The boundary to neighbouring dwellings is substantially formed by the outbuilding, which will also form one of the dwellings, so would contain external activity in the shared amenity space within the confines of the site. Amenity of occupants is also important, and the submitted plans show that the building can accommodate one-bed units that meet the requirements of National Described Space Standards and also provides a modest shared private outdoor space. The immediate street scene of Scorthorpe Avenue, Middlegate and Balham Road is mixed in character with properties of varying types and styles. The line of bungalows to the north and two-storey semis with varying roof types and modest gardens in front set on the other adjacent streets. Further along Middlegate is a development of 2- and 3-storey connected buildings containing flatted accommodation. So just attached it into your report are the floor plans, so I've got them on the screen there. So you've got 3 units on the ground floor, which all open directly outside, and then the 3 on the first floor share a shared stairwell, which then opens out to the front. And then the outbuilding conversion. So again, you've got a single bed unit, and then the remaining space has been proposed to use as a bike store. So on the site layout, you'll see that there's been provision for off-street parking on the back of the footway. So you've got 4 spaces on one street and 3 fronting the other. Plus, you've also still got a little bit of space as well in front of the building on the street, for example, for visitor parking. So that's the building as it is now. See, it has been unoccupied and attracted some antisocial behaviour. So, as mentioned in Council's correspondence, has been boarded up at ground floor because of that. That's the view from the neighbouring property on Scorthorpe Avenue. So you've got the 2-storey semis that are largely along that street. That's the view from Balham Avenue. Inside the site, that's the space between the house and the outbuilding that forms a corner. And if you look further back, you'll see the you'll see the raised level of the garden of the house behind, which is substantially higher, and they've then got a cover for presumably for for a vehicle. Okay, so the proposed alterations be visible in the street. However, the appearance of the building is almost identical to that previously approved when the proposed was to create a single large dwelling. Proposal includes off-road parking on both street frontages, as I've taken you through those photos. Additionally, there will still be some space for on-street parking. So in conclusion, taking all the matters into consideration, the proposal is considered to be sustainable development and complies with the relevant plan policies, and recommended planning permission should be granted subject to conditions. And I believe we have a speaker on this chair.
Thank you for that, Mark. We've got Mr. Scott Clarkson, member of the public, has requested to speak. If you'd like to come down to the front. This is now your opportunity to speak and address to the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to start, and again when you've completed your submission, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Being a resident of Scorthorpe Avenue and a direct neighbour to the property in question, I would like to voice my objection to the proposed development. Our residents are lucky enough to enjoy a quiet suburban avenue comprising predominantly of young couples, new families and retirees. Such combination of demographics creates a rich sense of community where every neighbour knows one another and looks out for everyone's greater good. My first point of contention is the idea that this proposed development will protect and enhance the qualities of the existing area, contributing to a safe, healthy and prosperous neighbourhood. In what way does it do so? My first grievance with this is that Scorthorpe Avenue and the intersecting Balham Avenue consist of either semi-detached houses or bungalows. How is the erection of flats in keeping with the area, thus enhancing its suburban aesthetics? Before any counter-argument involving Middlegate is put forward, please note that Middlegate is a self-contained plot with 4 houses and a road separating it from the proposed development. Any arguments using Middlegate as a reason for the sprawl of flats is misleading. The main thing that attracted me and my partner to Scorthorpe Avenue was a real sense of community, friendliness and potential for starting a family. Houses which come up for sale in the area are rarely on the market for long, as people value the safety our community provides. So much so that people rarely want to leave the area and tend to move to the neighbouring bungalows on the surrounding streets, like my own property's previous owners. Currently, children can play out in the safety without any real fear of traffic or antisocial abuse. My biggest fear is the transient lifestyle of individuals that single-bedroom rental developments attract and the damage that could result to our community. I strongly feel that this development serves only to benefit the investor at the cost of our residents. The proposed development will not promote long-term living for most individuals. Instead, it is likely we will have a high turnover of people, meaning our neighbourhood community will suffer. I would also like to bring to the forefront of everyone's mind that this development in question is within the local catchment of 2 prime Doncaster schools, 0.3 miles from Don Valley High School and 0.4 miles from Castle Hill Primary. At a time when there is a real issue with housing for young families and rife competition for good schools, why are we even considering a development which stands to reduce safe, walkable distance homes for young children? It is my strong recommendation that this application is refused. The audacity shown in the way the planning has been pursued is laughable, to say the least. In my opinion, it should be clear to everyone in this room that there was never any intention of the investor that this property would be used for private residential use and that flats has always been the end goal from the start. I find it hard to believe that the waste of everyone's time in January was by accident and that it was used as a method to try to get things passed without having to go through the proper proceedings. I agree this property is in desperate need of repair, but single-bedroom flats are not the answer. As previously mentioned, the current proposal will be detrimental to our whole community and will only serve to benefit the investor at the cost of existing residents. Not one neighbour that I have spoken with is for the development.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Clarkson. Does any of the committee like to ask Mr. Clarkson a question? No? Okay, thank you for that. Therefore, we're going to go into debate, and if you've got any questions for the planning case officer. Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, a lot's been made of on-street parking, but this development takes up quite a substantial amount of that on-street parking with their parking bays on the property. So it's not as much as on-street parking as is made out. I'm sure that the parking for the flats is going to take up probably 3 or 4 on-street parking positions. So it does, you know, how much on-street parking on that curtilage will there be around there? Because I noticed there's a drive right next to it on the left-hand side on them property, so there's no parking there. And where will the visitors park?
Okay, well, first of all, there's a parking space allocated within the site for each flat. So the 7 off street, and then which it meets the standard which highways required. They didn't raise any objections to it. There's at least there's no parking restrictions actually on the street as it is. So there is space then available for on-street parking for visitors. But I mean the main concern starting point from a policy point of view is should be space for each unit when it comes to flats, and that's what's been provided.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Stapleton.
Yeah, in the interest of debate, I think I could come up with something. Just to clarify, we're talking accommodation for 7 people, is that correct? Just nod. You don't have to, yeah, for the benefit of tape, Mark, it's Mark, not Jess, he's nodding. I just find it really strange how we're debating a plan application that provides accommodation just for 7 people as if it's like 700. It's just for 7 people. And I've looked at all the objections and I'm really struggling to see a material planning reason to object. So therefore, I'm going to support it, I'm afraid. So, thank you.
Councillor Beach.
Yes, in view of what Gary just said, it's 1-bedroom flats, which we think is 7 bedrooms. But are they single bedrooms or are they double bedrooms? Because we could be talking about 14 people.
Yeah, the room sizes, they look like single bed sizes, those ones. So I think in all likelihood they're going to be single bed units.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to conditions? Do we have somebody move that? Councillor Stapleton. Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Coates, can I show of hands of all those in favour, please? Those against? Therefore, that is passed. Thank you very much for that. Okay, application number 5 is planning application 22/01376/FUL. Before I read the rest of it, we have been asked if we can defer this item due to the agent not being well and able to attend. Are we therefore happy to defer this to the next meeting? Is there someone willing to move that? Seconder? And are we agreed? Okay, so therefore application number 5 is deferred. straight from agenda item number... Okay, agenda item number 7, appeals decision. This is a report for information only. Is there any member wishing to speak on this? No, therefore can I ask the committee that we move that this be noted. And is that agreed? Brilliant, thank you. Item 8 is Planning Enforcement Quarterly Report. Owen Herring from Planning Enforcement Officer will introduce this item. Is that Ian or Owen? Which? It is Owen. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, is that all right? Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here to answer any questions about the quarterly report on behalf of the Planning Enforcement team. The report relates to the fourth quarter of 22-23, being the months of January to March. And as always, the report contains updates from a selection of cases over this quarter, just to provide you with an overview of what we're doing and what we're undertaking. So, yeah, I won't keep you any longer because I know it's been a long session, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? Therefore, are we happy to move that it be noted? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 9 is the making of an immediate Article 4 direction removing permitted development rights related to the demolition of buildings at Doncaster Sheffield Airport. This is being presented by Chris Hall, Principal Planning Officer, Planning Policy and Environment. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'll also try and keep this as brief as I can. I've been asked to provide you a quick update regarding the making of an Article 4 direction at the airport. So as members of the committee will be aware, on the 19th of May, Council Ball approved the making of immediate Article 4 direction, which will remove permitted development rights related to the demolition of buildings at Doncaster Sheffield Airport. Once the Article 4 direction is made, the demolition of any building at the airport will require planning permission to be granted. This is a power that doesn't currently exist. Currently, under permitted development rights, the only powers that we have to act on a matter of demolition where it would be in relation to the method of demolition or remediation of the site. We can't prevent a building being demolished for another reason. The Article 4 direction gives us power to assess the principle of demolition and scrutinise it through the full planning process. It provides us with greater oversight should a building demolition be proposed at the airport. For planning committee, it's likely that given public interest in matters at the airport, applications affecting the airport will be decided by committee. There will now be the ability to assess any proposals for demolition against local and national policy, including Policy 6 of the local plan, which relates to the airport, and other material considerations, and you will have the option to either approve or refuse the application based on the consideration of these matters. This provides greater scrutiny of proposals and their impacts than would otherwise have been afforded under permitted development rights. Buildings that are covered include the terminal building, air traffic control, tower, hangars and the runway. These are important to the operation of the airport and are generally costly to replace. The Council are taking steps to reopen the airport and want to preserve this irreplaceable infrastructure asset. The demolition of buildings would clearly inhibit the viability of reopening the airport. We believe there's strong justification for taking these steps which help protect the operational integrity of the airport and maintain the chance of the airport reopening and harnessing the economic potential for the city and the region. We have consulted previously on potentially making this Article 4 direction, and there was overwhelming public support for it. In addition to this, Peel did respond to this consultation to the airport operator, and their consultation gave us cause for concern that some buildings at the airport may be at imminent risk of demolition. We therefore believe that there's the required justification to move now and remove the right to demolish buildings using an Article 4 direction. This decision to approve this is now in the call-in stage, which ends tomorrow at 5 p.m. Subject to this, the order will be sealed and will fully be enforced from next week, given time for the letters to arrive with the interested parties. Effectively, subject to call-in, as of next week, the demolition of any building at the airport will require planning permission. We must then undertake a 21-day consultation, which is required by legislation, taking on board comments made before deciding whether to fully confirm the direction, which we have 6 months to do. I want to stress this only applies to demolitions on land within the red line boundary, which is contained within the committee report, which is effectively the operational boundary of the airport. The committee report includes more details, a separate report and a full justification paper online as well to view. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you for that, Chris. This report is for information only. Does any member wish to speak on it? Councillor Cox?
Thank you. And I think you thought I was going to say something anyway, didn't you? But thank you for the report. But I mean, it's a shame that it's not as extensive as it could be, showing the whole picture. But it take that much up. But I mean, there was some buildings that an application had been made to knock them down. I believe it were 2 garages, and I believe that some information that's out there on social media is just complete codswallop, for want of a better word. And obviously we have regular meetings with Christian, and you know, and it's good. We kept within the loop. But I'd just like to ask a question about an email that the mayor sent out to all. I don't think she intended to, and I won't say where it was because obviously this is recorded. But it relates to Gateway East and Article 4 being extended to Gateway East. That isn't the case, is it?
I'm not aware of any email or the content of any email, but this Article 4 direction relates solely to the operational boundary that's in the Planning Committee report, which is effectively the terminal building, the hangars, the runway. We've narrowed it down to the narrowest possible geographical location to be covered. So, yeah, it doesn't relate to, this one doesn't relate to anything at Gateway East, which I presume you mean is the land to the west of the terminal building.
Yeah, it is. The ones where Petone and everything else is going off up there, and where the application went for where railway station was supposed to be and all that stuff. And within 04, isn't it? Within that area, if Peel, for example, came to planning and gave a reasonable application that were watertight, I'm not saying that they are, or we just don't know, do we? Nobody knows. It would only be refused, obviously, on grounds that are deemed legal. But there was some comments that were made by Oliver regarding the way that he would protect it, just to refuse everything. I mean, that is just, it's wrong. But, you know, it could, in my opinion, open us up to a big legal battle with Peel that would potentially cost our authority a lot of money. But I agree with it. Don't get me wrong. I agree with it.
I mean, if I could just come in on the last point, obviously DSO4 is outside of the boundary of this Article 4. This is just related to the demolition of buildings at the airport. And if an application did come in on DSAO4, then it would have to be assessed via local and national policy and judged in that way. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Beach.
Yes, thank you. In your representation, you said that the call-in period ends tomorrow, but there's a sort of a lag allowing for any. When does that finish? And subsequent to that, between tomorrow night and when you allow, could they sneak on and do something they hadn't ought to, like knock something down?
Sorry, yeah, so it's a process point. We've got to send out letters and we've got to allow time for the letters to arrive. It's obviously the weekend, so we anticipate the letters will be there by the 5th of June, which is Monday. Anticipate by that date we can say that's in force and you were notified, and so on. So, yes, I mean, but this could happen anyway, you know. They could knock something down anyway, but there's nothing stopping them in the meantime, apart from the fact that we've clearly moved to make this Article 4 direction. It's not, you know, it's out there in the public domain, so we would hope that they don't do that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, Councillor Cox.
Thank you. I think what we've also got to realise is that the authority is also doing a piece of work to show the value of that site, and it's right, isn't it? And if they knock things down that could be potentially an asset, they're going to lower the value of that site anyway. Not only for its potential to be reopened as an airport, but also the amount that it's worth is what it is. Yeah?
Yeah, obviously, whilst negotiations are ongoing with the council about potentially reopening the airport, then the assets are part of that discussion. Obviously, from the council's point of view, if assets were to be lost, they'd be very costly to replace. We're talking tens of millions of pounds, depending on what it is. So that's why it's important to move to try and protect them for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Can I ask committee members that we move that the report be noted? Is that moved? Is it seconded? And is that agreed? Thank you. Members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business of today's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and input, and I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody.